Once upon a time, on the island of Cape Breton, in the land of Nova Scotia, there was a sort of paradise. Until one day, things changed.
There's one up here on western Cape Breton, and then the balance down here on the Scotia Shelf.
The licenses awarded today allow oil companies to explore 19 parcels of land totaling more than 5 million acres.
No sooner did we find out about this shoreline permit in the middle of our spawning nursery and migratory routes, then we found out that yes, indeed, the freight train had arrived, and none of us even knew that any of this was taking place. My, they smell gorgeous. You know, fishermen say that the lobsters are at their peak when the lilacs are in full bloom. This is what I mean by a freight train. If you look at this map, all of these colors are oil leases all along here. There are literally hundreds of coastal communities. If you include the land jobs of all the plant workers, you're looking at 20,000 people being employed just in the southern Gulf. There is a $1 billion a year fishing industry.
Smells nice when you're half hungover.
By the time we find out, we are fighting permits that are already approved, where the money has already exchanged hands between the petrochemical industry and the government, and it's like we're playing catch up, trying to say, no, where's the public process here?
Our biggest species is lobsters, and we have snow crab and groundfish and herring and mackerel, and there's a good tuna fishery here, and there's all kinds of other marine life like whales and dolphins and seals. I think I felt just like everybody else. We're kind of shocked by the whole thing. It's just unbelievable that something like this could be happening, and you know, we felt that there would be a more open process. You know, this is not what's happened at all. But they've completely ignored any request from the fishermen to put a halt on the permit or to withdraw their permit and to do a proper independent environmental assessment on all species.
The oil and gas industry basically has had the run of Atlantic Canada. They've been able to bid on, except for George's Bank, the Sable Island Gully, an area of dispute between Newfoundland and Nova Scotia. I mean, basically they've had the opportunity to bid on any piece of ocean they want, and they certainly have. In the last few years, 48 licenses have been handed out in Nova Scotia to the oil and gas industry.
The oil and gas industry in Nova Scotia began to develop in the late 60s, early 70s. The consortium was put together that began to develop the Sable project, and as we speak, there's now gas flowing from Sable into a pipeline that hooks directly into the New England market. The oil and gas industry is one of the most regulated in this province, and I as minister would not move forward if I didn't feel comfortable that we can accommodate the concerns of the environment and at the same time create a positive opportunity for growth and development in this province.
All matters related to oil and gas development in marine areas are managed by the Canada-Nova Scotia Offshore Petroleum Board, a federal provincial agency. Environmental assessments take place after the board awards exploration licenses.
The mandate of the offshore board addresses safety of the workers, environmental protection, conservation of the resources, Canada, Nova Scotia benefits, and the curation and dissemination of information that comes out of the exploration and development activities. So it's a rather broad mandate. Essentially, the entire offshore is open for business.
Companies nominate areas to the Petroleum Board that they wish to license for exploration. After a bidding process, a license is awarded to the company promising to spend the most money.
The proponent does the environmental assessment, and then we play a role in reviewing that environmental assessment from a scientific perspective and saying, yeah, you know, this, we agree with this, or in fact, there's information missing here, or they didn't consider, you know, a particular factor. Then that information is provided back to the Canada-Nova Scotia Offshore Petroleum Board, and they issue the permit.
I think the Canada-Nova Scotia Offshore Petroleum Board Act was perfectly designed for a Soviet system. It's extraordinary that it ever passed in Canada, and even more extraordinary that none of the environmental groups in this country were aware of it when it went through Parliament. There's no requirement for public consultation. The Act, the body of the Act claims that it supersedes any other acts, and the government has accepted that to mean it isn't bound by the normal federal environmental assessment process. It's taken that to mean that the requirements to protect conservation and life in the sea that exist under the Oceans Act don't apply when you're dealing with the oil and gas industry.
The industry needs clarity and certainty in order to make its investment decisions, and any changing of the rules midstream or any regulatory or fiscal regime that doesn't provide for clarity or certainty means that a company is going to take a look at that particular jurisdiction and maybe decide that they're going to invest their monies somewhere else.
In Norway, the ocean is closed to oil and gas development, and they have to make a case to get it opened.
In Norway, there are public consultations, environmental assessments, and an act of parliament before areas are licensed.
Both industries can coexist, but we want to be able to negotiate their access to the fishery, particularly in areas where we have a tradition. And where there are areas of key importance to us.
If you look in other jurisdictions through time, it's become apparent that they can coexist. The North Sea experience, certainly through the 70s, there was a learning process on both sides. The Gulf of Mexico is another clear indication. So a part of it, I believe, part of the concern is founded maybe on a lack of information.
If you want to look at the North Sea's oil fields are all 80, 90 miles offshore. There's more comparable to Sable Island. They're not comparable to what's happening in the Gulf of St. Lawrence.
Well, there's no other coastal area in North America that's staked out for oil and gas, only Atlantic Canada. It wouldn't be permitted in California. No offshore oil and gas, inshore or coast or out offshore, is allowed in British Columbia. The eastern seaboard of the United States doesn't allow this. The developments in the Orkneys and Scotland and Norway are offshore. These are the only shoreline permits anywhere in the world, with the exception of third world countries where people are not expected to be able to put up a fight.
As far as moving into the near shore, there seemed to be a fair bit of concern in the community that the presence of drilling rigs on the horizon would detract from, certainly the tourism component, but also, in terms of what it meant to the fisheries. But the reality is that the drilling platforms and the work would be carried out something in the neighborhood of 20 kilometers offshore, and I believe the horizon in that area only extends out to about 15 kilometers.
At sea level, one can often see Prince Edward Island, 50 kilometers away. While we often hear about the collapse of the East Coast fisheries, one hears little about the wealth created from the lobster, crab, and tuna fishing with record prices and catches in recent years. In many Cape Breton communities, the fishermen are amongst the wealthiest residents.
You're looking at gross incomes that could be 50, and then the crabbers and everything. You're up $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 a year. Plus the fact that all of our money, the shopping centres, the stores, the retail businesses, the service industries in Sydney. This is the biggest thing in our economy, and this is where we're spending all of our money. All of our money stays here in the local economy.
You'll be getting a message across.
The Save Our Seas Coalition was formed to fight against the inshore permits. The group has membership from Aboriginal, fishing, environmental, and other groups.
Automatically be an exclusion zone for oil and gas. I think we'd have to fight for it. That was not automatic.
here so she can follow up on that.
Yeah, I think that's what.
Yes, that's who it was.
And then Mary did some information on the history of the Cabot Trail license.
According to the Department of Fisheries, we have the finest fish in the world in Nova Scotia, and yet they're willing to sacrifice that. 45 leases had been issued by the Petroleum Board, and there was no environmental impact study and no public consultation. The people who elected the government had no input into this. I felt like our powers were just being sapped from us, that we were being treated like non-entities and that we had no say-so. I had to get involved because it was just something that was so appalling. I organized a meeting at the school and probably got about 40, 50 people to come. This was the beginning of our awareness.
Because we have received nothing but form letters from Bert Dallingwall and David Anderson deferring us to the Canada-Nova Scotia Offshore Petroleum Board for a year now.
We have a grassroots network of fisheries organizations, community members, 10 municipalities that have said no to oil and gas. We have the best, the strongest, the most inspiring, and most diverse coalition I've ever seen on an issue. So I draw strength in feeling that we will be successful.
We agreed on that? Yeah. Okay.
You know, lifestyles are changing more and more, you know, things are getting more modern. But when you kind of look back, you can still see the need to continue on those old ways of gathering food, you know. Because you never know what's in store in the future. You still should know how to live off the land a little bit. You know, my family and our people fished here for many generations, and it supplied us with a constant supply of fish and food. And to think that's going to be in jeopardy, you know, for my kids and their kids, it's a pretty scary thought, and I'm quite alarmed, you know, that non-renewable resources, you know, give more priority than the renewable resources that we have. Feels good to be here, especially on a day like today.
The Gulf of St. Lawrence needs protection for a number of reasons. One is its inherent unique nature. It's unique in biological terms because it is a place where you find a mixture of warm temperate and cold temperate plants and animals that you just don't find anywhere else in the world.
The whales have had 30 million years to adapt and evolve in the ocean. And they have exquisite abilities in terms of their sensory perception, their sound production, their whole mapping, acoustic mapping of the world of the ocean.
Christopher Clark is a world expert in the science of how whales communicate over long distances. His research into seismic blasting and its disturbance of whales was an important factor that led to the moratorium on oil and gas exploration off California.
So imagine a blue whale that sends out a powerful low-frequency sound that takes seconds and minutes before it strikes an underwater seamount or continental shelf and then returns. And it can hear those echoes and build an image of the world from those echoes. So their whole world, their whole sense of self and consciousness is centered around the perception and the production of sound. It's like it's a frog pond. There's somebody going meow, and then somebody going boom, 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 boom. Someone else going woo, woo, woo. They're all there. It's this massive mixture. And then on top of that, you have the humpback whales chattering away and just sort of like being jazz musicians. It's just this fantastic cacophony of sound. And along we come in the last 20, 30, maybe 50 years, we start inventing tools for probing the ocean. And how do we probe the ocean? We produce sound.
We want to do some modern seismic that can give us a clearer picture of that natural gas potential. And if the results of that seismic bear fruit, then we potentially propose a well to be drilled down the flank of the, to try to intercept these beds.
What seismic is a way of trying to interpret what's below the Earth's crust. We have no way of looking down into the Earth and telling what's there, so what we do is that we send down sound. Years ago it was dynamite, now it's done by geophones that actually put noise down there. And the various rock formations will give off different types of sound that come back to surface. And it's the speed at which it comes back tells us what's down there.
This is a map showing the red shows the edge of our block again against Cape Breton Island. And these lines show existing seismic that has been shot in the area. Over 80,000 kilometers of data have been shot. And what we're proposing to undertake are these blue lines in this corner of the block. The blue lines represent about 600 kilometers of data, so it's less than 1% of the seismic that has previously been shot in the Gulf of St. Lawrence.
Following periods of intensive seismic blasting, there are significant declines in fish catches. Now, whether those are related or not is very difficult to say because there was, at the time, no actual documentation of impacts of the seismic blasting activity.
We've actually done some studies of the timing of this seismic and looked at the correlations with fish take in the Gulf of St. Lawrence to see if there was any effects that statistically that we could see, and had a fisheries consultant look at that, and the conclusion was that there are no direct relationships.
When we gave way and the vessel had passed, we went back to the fishing area, and the fish were gone for a good 24 hours. And that, of course, had a cost to us. And when we tried to take it up with the industry, the oil industry, we certainly weren't received favorably. They basically said they had as much right to the ocean as we do.
I had a chance encounter with somebody who works in a seismic vessel, and they were doing some seismic around Sable Island in shallow water there, and he said that at night the floor of the vessel shook so much that they couldn't sleep, and that you could see when the seismic air guns went off, you could see fish being propelled out of the water, so pump, pump.
We're not going to reinvent or invent the science that's going to make everybody happy and eliminate all of the unknowns that are out there with respect to seismic or drilling or any of these activities. You can always find something that you're not going to have an answer for.
This is actually a seismic vessel. It just sounds like a very distant thump. The seismic ship that was operating these air guns was somewhere off of Canada 100 miles away, 200 miles away. These sounds were heard as far away as the mid-Atlantic ridge from this seismic air gun. Seismic exploration and oil and gas development and production produce large amounts of noise. And the whales depend upon sound, and this noise, you can think of it as an invasion. It's an insult into their lives. How does that affect you if you're a whale? Well, the first thing it does is it shrinks your world. The world that you were used to living in, where you could hear and communicate with other animals hundreds of miles away, has suddenly been shrinked so you can only hear your nearest neighbors. We don't know enough about the breeding habits and the feeding habits of these animals to predict how the shrinkage of their communication system and their navigation system will affect their populations. And it's the scale of it that's so amazing. I mean, this is not some little trivial sparker or someone tapping on the side of the boat. These are explosions that are happening at regular intervals, every 10 seconds, every 13 seconds, for hours and hours and hours and days and days and days. I would not be surprised if one looked at the ears of animals living in these areas of high seismic activity, that you would actually find notches in their ears where they had lost the ability to hear in certain frequency ranges because of just physiological damage. There's just that much seismic energy in the water.
In July 2000, just before a federal election, Fisheries Minister Herb Dhaliwal came to Cheticamp on Cape Breton to announce a wharf expansion. It was one of those days when no one except the press showed up, so he spoke to an empty parking lot.
And I think it's extremely important for ministers of the Crown to get out to local communities, as I have been doing, so that they can bring their challenges and their issues to me.
Protect, we'll protect the fishery, Protect, we'll protect the fishery.
We're here to stop the exploitation of these fishing grounds by people who don't know what they're doing. This was done without permits, without environmental work, without public hearings, and we're not going to allow it. Well, I'm
Good to see you. I'll be meeting with some of your representatives.
Mr. Minister.
How are you? Nice to meet you.
I hope you listen to us.
How are you?
Mr. Minister.
How are you?
Cape Breton, welcome.
Nice to meet you. No environmental impact report. There was no public hearing. It's not a proper way to conduct the public's business.
Well, I'll be meeting with the representatives today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're looking for the Minister of Fisheries to take the lead, to show leadership, and to say the permits are rescinded under my authority under the Oceans Act. If someone's got a problem with them, let them challenge him. But under the Oceans Act, the language is very clear. He has that authority.
The oil industry will take what the oil industry wants. The rest of us who have been here for hundreds of years can have what's left over. That's the petroleum industry's definition of coexistence. That's not our definition.
A lot of us saw Mr. Dhaliwal in Cheticamp last July, and he didn't seem the slightest bit concerned. He didn't want to hear anything about it. If those leases wouldn't be out there yet, I don't think they would start the process in the first place. I mean, they never expected all this backlash. The oil companies certainly were not looking to come in an area and have such a problem with the local people. You know, they didn't ask for this. They didn't know any different. They get leases where they can. We're not blaming the oil companies, but the fishermen are really upset that our two levels of government have sold out our interests.
But my job is to protect the fisheries and make sure we have conservation, make sure that we protect that resource, and I'll ensure that that'll be done.
The Canada-Nova Scotia Offshore Petroleum Board Act has one significant check and balance in its legislation. the federal energy minister or the provincial petroleum minister have two opportunities to veto areas before exploration licenses are granted. Why didn't Energy Minister Ralph Goodale use this veto?
Obviously, there's a process for dealing with the recommendations that flow from the offshore board. There are certain powers that are vested in ministers, but rarely can those powers be used unilaterally. They very normally need to be used in consultation with the corresponding minister within the provincial jurisdiction.
In contrast to the legislation, Mr. Goodale is basically denying his veto is a veto. The issuing of a license means a company has exploration rights to an area, which allows it to attract investment or even sell these rights. This can all take place before environmental assessments.
Now, the issuance of a license obviously is not pre-approval from an environmental point of view. Whenever activity is proposed to be undertaken that involves potential environmental disruption, that of course triggers the appropriate environmental process, and that all has to happen before that activity is undertaken. So the license itself is not a pre-approval on the environmental issues.
The Canada-Nova Scotia Offshore Petroleum Board Act should be either massively overhauled or repealed. There's enough existing authorities within federal and provincial governments to give out permits. The Act was obviously designed to move in one direction forward and towards one decision, green lights, so that the oil and gas industry had a simple, direct, one-stop shopping, quick approval process. It was designed to encourage investment in the offshore. It wasn't designed in any way, shape, or form to consider the public interest, much less to protect it. The fact that the permits were issued during a provincial election campaign, of course, increases my sense that this was political. Without thinking it through, people could think that oil and gas development in an area of high unemployment constituted an economic advantage that might get you some more votes.
And if they catch nothing, they'll never complain. Oh, I wish I was with them again.
It's oil.
Boys in their boats call to girls on the shore, teasing no one.
I never said it's oil at all.
The people of Nova Scotia will be taken from a have-not status to a have status.
We used to say going down the road, going to Toronto. Well, those days are over.
You imagine a piece of the universe more fit for princess and king.
Spread your tiny wings and fly away.
For Marion Bridge and the pleasure it brings.
Royalties will begin at 2% of gross revenues and escalate to as high as 35% of net profits.
Ho, jingle bells, jingle all the way.
You just bid how much seismic work you want to do or how many wells you want to drill. I mean, you know, there's no money coming into the coffer of the government. I mean, the service companies love it because they get the seismic, they get to rent the boats and all that stuff. It's a good process for that, but it doesn't give you anything for the land.
Once no longer with Nova Scotia Resources Limited, Jim Livingston became the foremost industry critic of Nova Scotia's offshore policies.
I fault the government at the time for not bringing in the proper people to negotiate the deal. I think the results is what you see today.
Well, to the contrary, I believe that the royalty regime will accrue significant revenues to the province of Nova Scotia. The overall amount of revenues accruing to the province will be in the hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars over the life of the projects, and that's tied just simply at this point to Sable.
It has tremendous opportunities. There will be jobs.
How many jobs we can create?
400 direct and indirect jobs. That's what Nova Scotians want.
What did you get for sending the gas to New England? Pipe in the ground, you got a few construction jobs. Where's the spin-off? I don't see any jack-up rigs being built in Halifax or Dartmouth or the Strait. I don't see a petrochemical complex at the Strait. I see some pipe that I guess was put in the ground to Boston, but what's the spin-off?
Sable's huge find of oil and gas and the height of employment was 400 people in building the pipeline. That's dropped down to a couple hundred, and most of those jobs aren't local.
Here are maps, distribution maps of sperm whales that have actually come from an environmental assessment of exploration drilling on the Scotian shelf.
We shouldn't trade fish for gas. We shouldn't trade our coastal communities for gas. It's not worth it.
These dots here are sightings of pilot whales, and you can see even from month to month throughout the year, that slope area is very important to those whales, particularly it would seem as a feeding area. This area that seems to be so important, not just to sperm whales, but for a lot of other cetacean species as well, directly coincides with where a lot of those exploration licenses have been given. We don't even have the knowledge to say what are so-called sensitive areas for a lot of these species. If we don't have that kind of basic knowledge, then if some kind of activity goes on which endangers the life that's out there, we have no idea of what we've lost.
Should oil and gas licenses be issued on the Scotian Shelf or any other area before an overall ecosystem assessment takes place, which might deem an area off limits?
The fact is, when you do deal with things on a permit-by-permit basis, you ultimately may add up to a system which is not as expected when you start looking at the area as a whole. It's not just true, I might add, for the offshore and in Nova Scotia. It's true, for example, with diamond mine development in northern Canada, to give another example where the same argument is there and where the same concerns have to be taken into account. This is not an area where you can simply say that the oil and gas industry must overrule all other concerns. There are legitimate concerns, particularly when we have in Atlantic Canada I think $3 billion export industry based on fisheries.
The reality is, when it came to Hibernia, we had an appropriate process. With respect to Terra Nova, we had an appropriate process. With Sable Island, exactly the same. So the notion that you can't have conservation, a precautionary approach, and commerce coexisting, I think is a false one. It's possible to do both.
I think at some point there will be people who will remain unconvinced regardless of what information is available, and certainly what we're attempting to do is to accommodate the general view of the overall public, if you will. Any issue will have people who are either violently opposed or dramatically in support of, and the vast majority remain to be convinced one way or the other.
Once upon our time, there is globalization, where the public sector and responsible authorities seem to disappear, and issues stick to no one, where laws and policies and their implementation are weakened, making environmental protection and the public good take a back seat to being open for business, and where it is okay to protest, but not too much.
Come here. She likes it very much if I go to her. So listen to me. Look at that way. She likes it. Beautiful. Yo, it's beautiful. Look at that. Huh? Yo. Okay. Anyway. very scared about the clear cut. I'm very scared about what's happening to our climate, and it's just, you know, has some relationship. The oil and gas business and all the energy we waste and clear cutting, and we put all in the same pot. So what we get the climate change. Come on, girl. Come on, come on. Yes, she likes it. Okay, so this was actually the beginning. You have to stop talking now because we make an interview. Anyway, thank you. I took my phone and I called him, and then he said to me, I can't come from somewhere else to tell Cape Bretoners what they really want. So I was actually mad.
Well, if I've offended anybody, first of all, I guess I would say I don't mean to do that. That's not my style.
And then I said to him, listen to me. If you talk to me like that, I have to ask you something. It may be true that I come from somewhere else, but your father, maybe, or your grandpa, came from somewhere else too once, you know, and you have no reason to talk to me like that.
I felt I was really boycotted in that there was really no interest in engaging with us on that. The response we received was, really, we don't want you here. That was the impression we had. I've had a number of phone calls from New York and from folks that do not live in Cape Breton that are really telling us that we should shut it down, stay away from Cape Breton. Movie actors and people from elsewhere that have vacation homes in the area.
I'm Steve Katz, and I'm a novelist. If there is an accident, and accidents seem inevitable, small and large, the crap will end up on these beaches. I have a great respect for the spirit of this place as it is. And I think it's important for anybody who has that kind of respect to make every effort to preserve that spirit. You know, I had a discussion with Henry the Marshhawk. And Henry
who?
Henry the Marshhawk. He passes 2 or 3 times a day, kind of keeps this place, you know, grabs an occasional rodent here. And he's worried about what'll happen to the rodents if there's oil exploration.
Really, they're quite happy to talk about the geology, happy to talk about the benefits that oil and gas industry has brought to other parts of the world, but pretty mum on what an oil and gas operation actually involves, the discharges, the routine discharges associated with it, pictures of that, to talk about the spills, which are an unavoidable part of operating an oil rig.
They're saying, well, it's just good for you because, you know, big oil won't do anything wrong. The worst blowout, one of the worst in the world, occurred off of Sable Island. The well blew for a year. Cost a lot of money. So these things do happen. And you've got to demonstrate. You have a role as an oil company to not only to your shareholders, but to the public to demonstrate that you can do this environmentally safe, friendly, and you know, develop it. And if you can't, then the public has the right to shut you down. And I don't think that's too much to ask.
If successful out there with a well, you could see down the road development either with 2 or 3 small production platforms or possibly subsea completions that would be linked to markets by a subsea pipeline to shore and on to market. The kind of work that we're proposing to do, the time frames we would do it in, I'm very confident that we can go out there and undertake that work, and no one will ever know that we were even there.
The other intrusion, which struck me when I became more familiar with how much industrial activity there actually is in the ocean in certain parts, say the North Sea, is at the bottom, unlike the surface, which seems perfectly calm, and maybe there are a few oil derricks, but the bottom is laced with pipes and pumps. There's a whole industry down there. It's a totally industrialized world, infrastructure on the bottom of the ocean. And those are the contrasts that most people are unaware of.
If we allow the petroleum industry to take over the inshore habitat, fish habitat in the Gulf of St. Lawrence, their next target will be the inshore of British Columbia and the eastern seaboard of the United States. These are all areas that are currently under moratorium.
Offshore BC, for example, has got to be, people have got to take a look at it, figure out where the areas are that industry can work in, figure out where the areas are that industry cannot be allowed to work in, and then go from there in promoting, in letting parcels of land for offshore exploration.
The conflicts over developing and exporting a non-renewable polluting energy source or making environmental protection the top priority is about when our society will adopt energy efficiency and renewable energy supplies. It is also about how poorly conceived public policy and legislation creates unnecessary conflicts within communities.
Female. The eggs sit inside there. That's how you tell.
The day before the date was announced for the Canadian election in the year 2000, the provincial and federal governments released a press statement that the inshore leases would go to public hearings. The terms of reference for the hearings, the choice of having only one commissioner, and no intervenor funding for citizen groups was all determined by the Canada-Nova Scotia Offshore Petroleum Board.
There is a process in place, and as a result of the expression of concern around whether or not there was sufficient information to make informed decisions, particularly on the part of people who are involved in the fishery, the review process that we've implemented will allow for the commissioner to hear concerns and to compile the information that's available and to find ways in which to address those concerns.
Well, certainly we're willing to review the process, and we recognize that the system was basically set up for offshore. And if there is indeed opportunity and suggestions for review, we'll be happy to consider them. On the other hand, you can't change legislation every couple of years. You have to have some certainty for industry and for applicants. So we will proceed cautiously in the review, and it'll depend, of course, upon clear indication that the current system is not working effectively.
So this is the start of the process. If you allow the seismic in, okay, you're starting down the road, hopefully to full-scale development. People don't shoot seismic just to have a picture on their wall. They shoot it to get drilling targets. They drill to find commercial quantities of oil or gas, and they take that to market.
If you ask a Norwegian today whether they're happy that they proceeded with the economic activity related to oil and gas, I think you would get a very positive answer.
I don't think that any of us could tolerate the thought of gas flaring offshore here, of jeopardizing the whales, and the biodiversity of this coast is quite extraordinary. So it's a rich fishing coast, but that's because life in the water itself is rich, and we have to protect that. This is one of the few beautiful, unspoiled places left on the planet.
We're wrong. 20 years from now, the fishery will still be there and the oil will still be there. If they're wrong, 20 years from now, the oil will be gone and the fish will be gone.
Certainly from the work that we've done and the anecdotal evidence that we've gathered, that Nova Scotians are indeed confident that the environment around Nova Scotia is being protected.
I can't tell you, and I don't think anybody can tell you, whether you will cause the ruin of pilot whale populations, sperm whale populations, or seals or fish, but you'll change that entire habitat forever.
Not my neighborhood, not my food, not my little harbor, not to my kids or their kids. You know, take it somewhere else where we can't see it, where it won't hurt nothing, or till you learn how to extract it without hurting something. You know, when you learn that, then come back and talk to us. But don't try to fool us, because we can see it happening.